Okay, we are back in our demo environment here, and I'm inside the Excel application. And as you can see in the ribbon bar, I've got a Prophecy Historian tab in my ribbon menu. And inside the Historian tab, there are a number of buttons that allow us to do a variety of things. So there are kind of a couple of main categories of things we can do here. Number one is we can perform administration functions. So, for example, I can do things like import and export my tag database here. So, if I select export tags, for example, you'll see a dialog box pop up, and this is the kind of interaction that you have with pretty much all of these Excel add-in functions. Is it'll pop up a dialog box that you configure to do whatever it is you want to do. So in this case, if I wanted to export my data, I could pick which fields I want to export over here on the right. I can export the data to a new worksheet or to either a CSV or XML file format. And there's some filter options here if I don't want to export all of the data. So anyway, the administration functions are one category of things that we can do. And then the other category is essentially querying data. And I'm going to go to this configuration worksheet here, and we're going to start here on the left with these buttons, and we'll show you some of these different options for querying information here out of the historian. So I'm going to start with the tags function, and the tag function allows you to query the historian tag database, and I put in a filter here, so I don't want to put everything in my spreadsheet. I just want some some of the tags, and in this case I've got tags that are related to a wind turbine, and they all start with have this T6 in the tag name. I'm going to use that. I'm going to query all of the tags for those wind turbine tags. It's going to ask me where I want to start putting the data. I'm going to select this cell. You can see that gets put into this output range, and then I can put or select items I want to output into my spreadsheet. So in this case, I'm just going to simply put in the tag name field. You'll see why in a few minutes. Once I have this configured here, I can click OK. And there we go. There's my wind turbine tags. And like you can see here, we've got, it looks like about 15 or 20 tags listed. Now, that in and of itself only gives you the ability to put in the information about the tag, and the rest of this information, querying current values, raw data, calculated data, filtered data, and so on, these actually pull in data from the historian archives. So if I start with the current value query, again, the pop-up dialog box gives you the ability to configure what you want to, in this case, query. And this is going to be, we're going to look at the current value, which is the last recorded value for each historian tag that I select. So we've got a tag name selection field. What I am going to do here is I'm just going to highlight all of the tags that I just put in to my spreadsheet. So you can see it put in that range of cells of the spreadsheet. And then it's going to ask me, I can put in some query criteria if I want to filter the data, but I don't. And then I can add whatever fields I want. And in this case, I'm going to put in the timestamp, the value, and the data quality. And then it's going to ask me again, kind of like when I did the tag name query, it's going to ask me where I want to put it. So I'm going to select this cell as my starting point, click OK, and there's my current values for each one of these tags. So this is an example of a simple query that you can do to look at the current data for one or more tags. We'll next move on and take a look at some of the more sophisticated queries that allow you to query ranges of data based on maybe some time period. Okay, we're going to show a couple of the additional queries that you can do here. One is the raw data query. Second is a calculated data query. We'll actually show you some examples of those. We'll show you what the filter data query looks like, but each one of these is very similar to the next, but they just essentially build on each other. Now, before I do any of these queries, what I'm going to do is in this tag name field, I'm going to set that equal to one of my tags in my list here. So I've got a bearing temperature. I'm going to select that, and that's just going to simply put that tag name into this cell B4 of my spreadsheet. You'll notice I have a start time and an end time already configured here. My end time I have is a formula that just says this is equal to now, so whatever the current time is. And my start time is equal to the end time minus 1 divided by 24. That gives me essentially 1 hour of data. So how are we going to use this? So I'm going to go to this raw data report tab that I created, and I'm going to use the raw data query here, and it's going to again pop up a dialog box. And it's going to ask me in this case for more than just a tag name, because in this case, since we're querying the raw data, we're looking for a start and an end time in addition to the tag name. So for the tag name, I'm going to go back to the configuration worksheet and select that B4 cell, and that gets pasted into this tag name cell of my query. Then I go to this, click in the start time field, and I go back to the configuration worksheet and select the start time, and I will do the same thing for the end time. And so now we're going to use those 3 pieces of information in this raw data query. And then it's going to ask me, where do you want to put the data and what data do you want? So I'm going to put in the tag name, timestamp, the value, and the data quality for every raw sample that we pull out of the historian archive. And the system's going to ask me, where do you want to put the data? I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to highlight a handful of rows. But what I'm going to do here down in my output range field is I'm going to add several more zeros, so that it gives me plenty of room to add, a fairly large query here. And I'm going to click OK, and it's going to use the parameters that we selected on the configuration worksheet, the tag name, the start time, and the end time, and then it's going to pull in all of the data for that tag that I had selected, which was my bearing temperature. So if you look here, we can see down for each one of these timestamps, you'll see we've got a value, a date and timestamp, a value, and the data quality for each one of these raw data samples that we pulled out of the archive files. So if we scroll down through the list, we should see, it goes down to row 182 in this example. So a couple of kind of cool things you can do here now. Now that we have that set up, I can say, you know what? I want to change my time period. I want to look at, say, instead of just the last 1 hour, let's look at the last 2 hours. So I'm going to change this start time to go 2 hours before now. And if I hit enter, then go back to my worksheet, this query has now updated. We should have somewhere around 350 or 60 rows of data, which we do. Yeah, 362. So we've basically doubled the number of rows of data simply by changing one of these parameters. So these are now acting as variables in my query. The other thing I can do here, in addition to changing the start and the end time, is I can change the tag that I'm looking at. So if I want to look at, say, my, let's look at the generating cooling air temperature. enter, select that tag, hit enter. So I now have 2 hours of data for that cooling air temp tag. And you can see now we've got data for that tag over that last 2 hour time period. So this is a real simple way for you to configure a query to pull in data from the historian using the Excel add-in. I'm going to show one more example here, a calculated data query, and we're going to do something similar here to what we just did with the raw data query. But if you look at the calculated data query, if I click on that button, it should pop up my dialog box. There we are. Again, it's going to ask for one or more tag names. In this case, I just want one tag, so I'm going to go to my configuration tab and select whatever tag we have selected there. And then we'll go to our start time. Start time and the end time, and select those fields. But the thing that we can do with this now is, instead of just pulling out raw data, is we can pull out data using one of these different modes. So we have interpolated, calculated, there's some various additional sampling types here. I'm going to select this calculated sampling. And what this allows me to do is use these various calculation modes, which are built into the historian, to extract data. So I can say, hey, I want to look at averages or min-max values or standard deviation or so forth. You know, there's a bunch of these items listed here. I'm going to select the average, and what it's going to do is ask me for a time interval. So I'm going to put in 1 hour. So I want to look at hourly averages of data for whatever tag we have selected here over whatever time period we have selected. So right now I only have 2 hours, so I should only get back 2 values here. Again, I'm going to put in the tag name, timestamp, the value, and the data quality. Ask me where I want to put the data in the output range field down here at the bottom. I'm going to select that row and go down to row 10, and then we'll add some zeros here just to accommodate a larger query if I need it. And as soon as I click OK here, we should be pulling in 2 values into my spreadsheet, which so now what happens here if I change either my tag name? So I'm going to select a different tag. Let's look at my active power tag. And you can see here now we're looking at the active power. But the other thing, and we're looking at hourly averages, but I'm going to change my start time. So instead of looking at 2 hours of data, I'm going to go back from now -1, which means I'm going to go back 1 day. So we now have from the September 27th at this time to the 28th, which is right now at this time. And if I go to that query, the calculated data worksheet here in my workbook, you can see now we should have 24 values that are the hourly averages of this tag. So the calculated data query gives you the ability to look at data in a way that's very powerful. Again, allows you to pull out data that not just the raw data, but things like, again, averages, min-max, standard deviations, totals, and so forth. The other powerful thing about this is that the historian server performs these calculations for you. So you don't have to pull in a day of data or a week or whatever and then figure out how to calculate hourly averages or min-max values or things like that. The historian server performs those calculations for you. So it's a really, really powerful tool. I'm not actually going to do this query, but we'll show this to you. The filter data query is just builds on top of the other two. So the raw data query is the simplest. Calculated data query is a little bit more sophisticated. And then the filter data query, this is kind of like the granddaddy of all of these. This gives you the same options as the calculated data query, but it also gives you some filtering options. So you can say, hey, I want to look at either raw data or calculated data and things like that. You can pick your tag name and your start time, end time, and things like that. But you also have some filter options. So this allows you to filter data that you may not want to see. So you can say, hey, only give me data for my wind turbine when the turbine's actually running, or something like that. So you can set some filter criteria here that allows you to control what data you actually are going to pull in from the historian. So the historian Excel add-in is a very powerful tool for people that like using Excel. It gives you a fairly easy to use tool for doing, again, both administration functions as well as gives you the ability to query data that you can then use in a report or analytics or whatever you might want to use it with. And I have another example of a spreadsheet here. Let me pull this other one up. Oops, wrong one. Let's go to this one. So this is another, this is actually a sample spreadsheet that we send you with the historian, and when you install the Excel add-in, you get this, as well as there's several others. But this is one of them, and what it allows you to do is there's a setup tab, and you can put in a bunch of tag names here, tag names and descriptions and engineering units, and then you can pick for each one of these what statistic you want to query, along with your start time, end time, and the report date, and so forth. And what this is going to do then, once you configure this setup worksheet, it will pull data into this tab. So it's going to show hourly. In this case, I've got this tag we have the maximum, this one has the average, this one has minimum. You could do the same tag and do the max, average, minimum, for the same tag here if you wanted to. But bottom line is I've got these various tags with different statistics, and we're showing hourly data for each one of those tags. And then the charts tab or worksheet has a chart for each one of those variables as well. So this is just an example spreadsheet that you can use to configure a report, and you can use it as is, or you can modify these as needed. So it just gives you a starting point to do some reporting using Excel. So we're going to take a pause here, and then we're going to come back in a moment, and we're going to then move on to show you our Prophecy Operations Hub visualization software.